private duty jobs will be what we use to make those payments. It won't come from the general fund. The only payments that will come from the general fund are to pay off what we already have in place prior to the implementation of this program.
So you are using the fees to pay for the cars.
Right,
Taxpayer fees, but the fees
from the
these
CNRE fund.
But we're getting car loans for now. In a couple of years, we're gonna have enough cash buildup in there that we're gonna actually buy cash,
Right.
cars for cash,
Okay.
rather than a 5-year note.
Right, but is it our capital plan, don't we allocate funding every year to the vehicle acquisition program? So wouldn't-
For the police cars.
Right, so would I expect
That
there to
would
be?
disappear.
But is it going to disappear for this year, this proposed budget? What I'm trying to understand is, are we double contributing once through?
No, so the only funds that are in the general fund relative to police vehicles are the funds to pay off existing commitments, but not for future commitments.
Oh, all right. I think I understand what you just said. Tuition, other districts, yeah, this is a big chunk down, right, from Salem, down $182,000. So that's lost revenue. That's a lot of money that we're not getting from Salem. I just wanted to underscore that so people realize what we're dealing with here. And then, of course, our sewer assessments are down by $357, so,
Yeah, the assessment's paid up. So the bond that the town bought 20 years ago to put in the sewers, the sewer department was paying the town for their share of that
Right.
assessment.
Still
It's
lost
done.
revenue,
It's-
though. Yeah,
Right, correct.
understand.
But they've made their 20 payments.
So, when I look up top, if I look at the increase in taxes this year, 3.5 million, it's like a 6.4% increase, right? If I do the math there. I mean, you don't have to check my math. But 6.4% increase in the tax liability for the town, for the taxpayers. It sounds about right. Just seems pretty heavy to me that we're leaning on the taxpayers. Or 6.4% increase, yet our budget, I guess our budget is up 1.7 overall. All right, okay, I guess I would just underscore my concern about our fund balance. I feel very uncomfortable with us taking money out of the fund balance in terms of the upcoming bonding that we're looking at. Not feeling good about it. I don't think it's the right thing to do. As far as revenue goes, that's all I have to say at this point.
John, questions on revenue?
Just one on halfway down the front of the first page, it says mutual safety emergency prep grant. Was 44,000 and change. How did we lose that? Or why? And where did it come
Where
from?
are you, John?
That is actually done through special appropriation during the year. So when those grants become available to us, we come before the boards and request special appropriation. So it's not something that's ever been part of the initial budget. It always comes subsequent to. But because it was revenue that was actually received on 6/30/17, that's why you see it reflected on this
So
sheet.
that grant isn't always there, available.
We typically end up getting some funds every year.
Yeah.
At some point.
Okay.
Then the only other thing we didn't talk about was the beach and recreation minus 175, and that's because it's going to enterprise.
Pay for it. Obviously, yeah, that's, the fees will pay for the beach operation.
Just felt like we had to bring that into the fold as well. Any other questions on revenue?
I don't have a question, but I have a thought or comment on the fund balance. Would it be helpful if we haven't done it already, to discuss the issue with our auditor or bonding attorney concerning the reliance on the Standard & Poor's standard as opposed to Moody's? Just a little bit of that professional expertise on that topic might it might allay some fear here, or concern here. Although I tend to agree that you can't get enough in that pot of the unassigned fund balance, but if we're just going to another rubric, another standard, which is a little more subjective than is Moody's, it might help. I don't know.
We had substantial conversations with our, we call them our financial advisor about this. And
Sure.
we were, weighing it out, and we knew what Moody's was looking at. Moody's sent some very, very critical letters to the state and to, as a result, to the towns, especially towns with lower fund balances,
Yeah.
frankly. We are one of them. We're on a watch list. We are. I mean, we've had great budgets and great management for decades in this town, but because of what's going on in the state, it's going to trickle down. We had a conversation with that financial planner, analyst, if you will, and this is when S&P started coming up into the conversation, and some of the other towns are doing just the same. We can bring them in here for a conversation midway through the year, after we get through this process, or not. But yeah, we're talking about it, but we'll make sure when we make, if and when we make that move, that it's well thought out, well planned, and well documented what we
Right.
expect to gain from it. That has to be a substantial return from moving
That's fine.
to another.
That's fine. Thanks.
Yeah.
It just might be a matter of assurance
Yeah.
or information, that's all. Thanks.
If the state continues to go in the direction it's going, and this, even though you see the cut line, but look at what we're getting from the state, if that keeps disappearing, and we're down to $1 million out of what was $9 million just a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
yes, we're gonna lose rating points on that. We're gonna lose our high rating. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
And not at the best time either. Probably the very worst time, because we voted the taxpayers voted to build new schools.
Thanks.
Upgrade the schools we already have. Let's be crystal clear.
Which is why the conversation about ratings right now is important.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
All right, any more board questions about revenues? Hearing none, we'll close conversations about revenues, and we'll go to budget deliberations. So here's an opportunity for each to speak about where we think we should go with the proposed budget.
I have a question on the process.
Okay.
So can you please share with us your plan for the process of moving through budget deliberations?
Okay, that's where I was going next.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
So what I would like to do is I would like everybody to go through, spend 5 or 10 minutes talking high level, areas that you're concerned about, areas that you think maybe have some margin and things like that. And once everybody has a chance to kind of do their high level conversation, then we can take each other's advice and we can start looking into the areas that we think there's really some significant potential to go after. And then we can get as deep into it as we want to get into it. But that way we can kind of start high level and get a little deeper and then get down into the weeds.
So last year, we entertained motions for very specific budget line item changes. Is that how we're going to handle that
Yes.
this year? And then
Yes.
after that gets out of the way, then we can talk about the macro level of what we would like to see the bottom number to be?
I think when we get done, I'd like to have the conversations first about everything holistically, and then a little bit deeper holistically, and then once we got each other's heads straight, then we can start asking about budget motions for, say, okay, I'd like to make a motion to remove $12.50 from account, whatever. So we can get into that level of detail, as opposed to just, well, I want to make a motion to remove $2,000 and I don't care where it comes from. I would rather have that specific conversation about line items.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that said, we'll start either side, start from Jason's side, I guess. Go through if you'd like to talk about high-level issues that, where you think that the budget is, if it's perfect the way it is now and it doesn't need any changes, so be it. If perhaps there's
We're gonna
areas.
do the budgets together, the Board of Ed and the
You can go through them together if you'd like, or you can do them individually, but yes, it's all one budget in front of us, and I don't want to separate the two.
How about I save my comments to last? Because you know what, everyone here is very good at asking my questions.
Okay. Ann, do you want to
Okay.
hit your,
Jump in. Okay. So, first of all, I just wanted to thank all the departments for the budget preparation. I mean, it was a massive undertaking, and the narratives were, very, very helpful because it gives the story, behind the numbers. So I just want to thank you for that. And I didn't have too many narratives that were difficult to follow, so that was good. So I have a couple of specific suggested reductions, but I just wanted to speak a little bit about how I approached the budget. So I kind of zeroed in on each department individually, each budget item individually, and I really kept the issue of state funding reduction in the back of my head, because I didn't want that to be some overarching driving force where I was really nitpicking and forcing issues and being highly unrealistic. So my point is that my proposed reductions would likely have been suggested regardless of this economic climate that we're finding ourselves in. Okay, and I feel confident about that. I'll come back to the issue of the reduction at the end. I have a thought on that that's independent of my suggested cuts. So I'm going to start with the town side, and I'm going to look at dispatch number 215. So we can jump to that one if you have that available. Okay. So I have a suggested reduction of $2,500 from this total proposed budget of $466,801. The possible area that I think this in my mind where it comes from is the part-time dispatchers. We now have 5 full-time and we have 9 part-time. So I understand from Chief Finkelstein's presentation to us the other day. And I understand the goal is to achieve a 2-person operation at all times. So I think the numbers are playing out okay with this 5th person, and this reduction I think is fair in that there's still room to get another part-time person or 2, but I think it kind of reins it in a little so he can take a good look with the 5th person now working completely full-time, which has just been a new addition, from 4.5 to 5. Let's see how it plays out before we just jump on there and keep having part-time people and so forth. So that was my thinking there. Library, I think that's at 420 in your budget book. Okay. This is kind of a massive budget. I suggest a $3,000 reduction in this $1,183,645 budget. And I think that it can be taken from the town funded books section of this budget, because I see that there are multiple sources of this book funding. And I don't see any consistencies over time, so it was very hard for me to put that together. More importantly, there is now a new strategic planning study that has been done. It hasn't been digested, it hasn't been analyzed, and I think that some of the library's mission may even change or be adjusted in some way. So I think we need to try to rein that in a little bit there. And my third suggested on the town side is animal control at 226. Let's find that. And this is a small reduction. The budget is $43,168, and I'm looking at the uniform line item. And I understand definitely that there will be a need for, proper professional appearance, and there's heavy wear and tear on uniforms. But the 1650 seems a bit it seems inordinately high to me, because we have a two-person operation, and in 2017 there was no dollar spent on this item, actuals. So I'm thinking, okay, we can rein this in a little bit, and we have to be as conservative as possible. So that's one that I think can be cut.
What was the number on that?
The number is, the budget
What you
itself
trying
is
to cut?
226, and uniforms was 313. And that was the item number, 313.
And you're cutting how much?
And I suggested 500.
Okay, I didn't get that part.
Okay, out of that 1650 request.
It wasn't that they didn't spend money on the uniforms, correct?
Yeah, in 2017.
But they did, it was Waterford bottom.
Oh, okay.
So we only
Okay.
had a number back
All right.
then. If you
And
remember,
then
that's cool.
it's an as-needed thing, so
Yeah.
it was very vague to me, and
Yeah, I get it.
it just seemed like high. But I do understand the nature of the work. I mean,
Yep.
you're, with a angry dog or a troubled dog, so definitely. I have two other little comments on the town side before I get into Board of Education. Smith-Harris Commission, happy to see that operating well. I would just love to see that sooner than later, and I'm glad we had the folks here from Historic Properties, sooner than later become as self-sustaining as possible. I think Mark talked about this, and income generating, actually. We have these wonderful historic properties. It'd be great to really utilize them, and great for our children and families in town to really get a sense of the town's history and history in general. So, but I do think that that's a good mission. I was happy to see that, and hopefully we can take steps in that direction. And another sort of self-sustaining little project to undertake is in, let's see, we have Commission on Aging budget for 18 on miscellaneous supplies. Oh, not miscellaneous supplies. Sorry, it's program supplies. We have this sort of this repetitive, I guess, $2,000, I guess, every year for the supplies. Again, I think this is something that we can either, somehow determine that a particular program requires certain equipment, tack it on maybe on a price, charge a little more. It's the same concept we have with the beach enterprise going on. Or we just have a nice benefactor in town. That's what we need to find. $2,000 a year, cover that topic, so.
Are you cutting that fully?
No, actually, I'm thinking about it, and I'm gonna hear what my colleagues have to say. I'm thinking about it, but I'll see what the shared feeling is.
So before you go on, so for the
Yes.
town budget, dispatch 215, area 215, department 215, your total was,
The total was to, the
2,500.
suggested reduction was 2,500.
library total was
3,000.
3,000,
Animal control, 500.
500.
And I'm contemplating,
And animal control is
yeah, the other.
219,
Animal control, the number of the
226.
the budget was
226.
226, correct.
all right, and those three are the three that you've talked about for the town so far?
Yes.
Okay.
And otherwise, I have to say, it was a very tight budget. I mean, again, I tried to put the blinders on, and, okay, I don't really care about the state cuts, and just do it, and it would, and so, definitely, okay.
Okay. So Board of Ed?
Board of Ed, okay, so, this budget is $47,776,943. So I'm suggesting a $200,000 reduction, and again, this would be up to Board of Ed themselves. They operate a little differently than our other departments do. But where I saw the areas of possible reduction would be, number one, maintenance, perhaps to coordinate and use the town resources already in place for items such as snow removal, field maintenance, and landscaping. And I know we've talked about the sort of ultimate connection we're going to try to have with maintenance between Townside and Board of Ed with charts and graphs and all this, but to be honest, we can get there before the charts and graphs, so I believe. So, for example, snow removal this year for Board of Ed cost, $19,000 or so, something that perhaps the town should be taking upon itself because it does have the equipment and folks in place. So that was one area within that rubric of the 200,000 to think about. Another area I was not wanting to see at least go up and perhaps reduce is the non-certified computer consultants. This is not my area of expertise, but I just felt as though it was on the high side and that it may be time to think about an in-house approach to this. So perhaps we can get more information on that. Third and fourth areas that would comprise this 200,000: textbooks and supplies within various line items. But that's where I was at with Board of Ed. And that brings me to a general point I wanted to make about, I think the night that the Board of Ed presented, wonderful presentation, thank you again. I did ask about what's happening in lieu of the ECS grants. Are we researching? Are we finding? Are we spending time hunting for other grants? And I guess we are not, because we don't have a dedicated person within Board of Ed or on the town side either for this function. It may be part of someone's job description to go ahead and fill out the forms for the typical grants that we get. So what I'd love to see on both Board of Ed side as well as town side is a very aggressive approach to this. We do need, that being said, we do need to reduce our reliance on state funding. There's no question. If we're going to go forward and be physically responsible, we've got to do that, absolutely. But on the other hand, we can't ignore that there's a world out there of potential monies that we need to tap into. So I really think that we need to look at that seriously. A suggestion Bill has made, and he can elaborate himself later, is that we hire a part-time, full-time grant writer, supplement our efforts here that we already are making. So, but I think it's really important. We can't just neglect it and sort of throw our hands up that can't do anything about it because we're being caught. Grants still exist. You may find more grants on the federal level than state level, at least within Connecticut. So, and that's it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Camille, you good with the budget as is? Maybe not.
Thank you, Ann. I'm very happy to see on your first year. I mean, you've really delved into the budget and you've gotten a good handle on it, and you've come up with some good ideas and suggestions. So, thank you. Being the veteran on the board, I think I would perhaps like to go last and give the other new member a chance to speak, just to give a fresh and new perspective on the budget as it's presented.
That's right. You can go through your stuff first, and we'll come back.
That's okay. I defer. I'd
Okay.
like to come back.
Lisa?
I actually would like to hear what John has to say. He's been here before, and I'd like to hear some fresh eyes. See some fresh eyes.
Oh, I don't know how fresh they are, but. Okay, I'll do the town budget first. I looked at Public Safety Police Department, which is 216. I know that the town budget came in at 0%, but I think from when I looked at it, I looked at computer maintenance on Public Safety Police Department, and it went from 10,000 to 15,000. I know personally that computer maintenance is an important thing, and it does increase every year, from year to year, but I thought $5,000 was a little high, so I took out $2,000. So they increased it, I increased it, left $13,000 out of the 15. The next thing was 329, public relations. which was, I guess, public materials that are passed out. That went from 1,000 to 1,500. I thought maybe we could stay at the same level at 1,000, so I subtracted 500.
John, what department is that?
Yeah, where was
329?
Department 216.
Oh, 316.
216, please.
But what line
Oh,
item?
sorry, the line item.
329.
I'm sorry, my bad. I
Oh,
got you.
public relations, sorry.
Yeah, it's a distribution of publications and safety material to the public. A lot of time, because I've seen that too, that a lot of time these materials that are passed out to the public, wherever they're placed for them to be picked up, 50% of them sit there for months and months, they're never used. So that's why I stayed with $1,000 from last year. And going to the library,
Okay, so police department's 2.5K?
to,
2,500.
216.
26?
No,
No, how much total? 2,000 plus 500?
2,500
Okay.
altogether.
Thank you.
2,500 from police.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
I got 200 for computer.
2,500.
2,000.
2,000.
And 500 less for 329.
That'll do it.
And moving on to the library,
420.
I went to tech supplies, which is 45201. Which was, I know going back a few years, it was 11,000, 15,000, and it dropped down to almost 8. And then it went down to 7, now it's back up to almost 10. So I figured I'd take off $1,000, because they were looking for almost a $2,000 increase. I figure 1,000 should be adequate. So that was all I had for the town budget.
Oh, it's the top.
So the 420, you want to remove
45201,
1,000.
1,000.
1,000, thank you. Okay. All right. Now you want to go?
Can we do Board of Ed?
Not yet. You
Oh.
want to do that first? What I
Yeah,
just did?
yep, continue with Board of
No.
Ed, please.
That's
Okay. Now here I'm in a quandary. So I'm looking at almost $48 million. And I had several places that I looked at to reduce. And I know I'm not there every day working like a lot of the people are at the high school, middle school, and the grammar school. So I'm just looking at the numbers and the percentage increases. So if somebody, as I'm going through this, wants to step up and maybe convince me that I'm, out of bounds, I'm trying to reduce too much, I'd welcome the information. The first thing I looked at was line 118, other certified salaried, which is occupational and physical therapy. It went up 87.2%, which was over $200,000. What I thought was to reduce that by $50,000. If anybody has any comments on that, I'd be glad to hear them.
Okay, anything else besides the
There's
50K?
plenty,
He's
yeah.
going to speak to it.
Yeah,
Well,
those
no,
people were,
we-
I don't know if you want me to.
No, we can't engage.
Can't? No? Okay.
No. Sorry.
All right,
No, we can't engage in conversations
Okay.
with the,
all right. We'll move on to the next one. 119, which was non-certified computer consultants. That was almost a 20% increase, which was over $52,000. So I thought that was a little high. I mean, how often do you need a computer consultant? I know there's a lot of computer systems in the schools, but I reduced that by 12,000. Then I went, okay?
okay.
Then I moved on to 122, part-time non-certified, which is substitute maintenance, That went up almost 28%, which meant over $55,000. And I reduced that by 20,000. Then I moved down to 126, instructional aids, which is classroom aids. And that came out to over $1 million. Now, I haven't been in school a long time. But when I went through first through 8th grade in Flanders School. I take that back. I went through first through 7th grade in Flanders School and 8th grade down in Nyack Center. And there were no aides at all. There was only one teacher for each class, and each class was over 30 kids. And I think we all turned out pretty good. I mean, I know the best scenario was one-on-one, one student, one teacher. But in those days, and I know things have progressed and things have changed, but I just, to my way of looking at it, maybe I'm too old to look at it that way, but I think that over $1 million for classroom aids is a little high, so I reduced that by 50,000. So I moved on to 127, monitorial aids, support staff. That's, from what I gather, it's lunchroom and health aides. That was almost 16%. And that moved up to 142,715. So I reduced that by 10,000. Then I went to item 611, which is instructional aids, which I read is paper, pencils, report covers, and so on. And that went up 3.5%, but the dollar figure was 373,597. So I thought maybe some economies of scale could be saved there, so I reduced that at 10,000. And the next one is 613, which is maintenance supplies, bags, towels, soap, cleaning supplies, and so forth. That actually went down 0.1%, but that went up to it was $202,175 less. But I think some economies could be saved there, even though it went down. I reduced that by 10,000. Then I went to 694, which is software, which is the software for the school and the students. And that went up by almost 51%, which was close to $120,000, which brought it up to $356,000. That again, I thought was maybe a little excessive. I reduced that by 50,000. And the last one was 50,000 even. The last one was item 731, equipment, instructional, which went up by almost 68%. And that, the dollar figure on that was $60,739. So that went up to $150,570. And that one I reduced by 30,000. So that total came out to around 240,000, which brought down that 2.59% to 2.07% increase on the budget. Now, I know that figure that may be a little high total, and I know we can't recommend line items because if that, say 200,000 was adopted, the school picks where the money comes from. But I was just looking at, like I said before, I'm not there every day, so I don't see how the operation works. But looking over the percentages and the amount of money that increase in certain these line items, I thought maybe I just reduce it by those amounts. It's not, to me, It's not a lot when you're looking at over $47 million. You're only talking like a little over 200,000. It's not going to, I believe, have a big impact on the education in the school system.
So are you suggesting 242 or 200?
242.
242, thank you. All right. Camille, you ready to go, or you want Lisa to go first?
I'll go. So, thanks to everybody that came out tonight to be part of the process. Your presence and your voice definitely matter to us. Thanks for all the teachers and the professionals at the school, and our supervisor, Jeff Newton, and his staff, who make our schools what they are. I mean, I believe it's about you guys. It's about the teachers and the commitment. And not that you don't need tools to do your job, but there's tools in a lot of other schools. And for me, from my understanding, my kids went to East Lyme. I think it's about the teachers, so I thank you for your commitment on that. And I also say thank you. I don't see many employees from the town here tonight, or department heads, but they're the ones that make our town work, make it a quality place to live. And I'm grateful for their work as well. There's been a lot of good work for the library. Lisa Timothy and her staff produce a lot of services for a lot of people, and that is, I think, a key indicator for the quality of a town is its library. They do a great job. Our Parks and Rec guy, Dave Putnam, has realized great growth for our beaches. They're sought after for other towns, and they come and want to be part of East Lyme. He's done a great job with that program. Joe Bregois continues to do more with less. I wish these guys were here to hear this, but they do great work. And to our first selectman, who's the leader of our town, I thank him for his leadership. But I will say, and everybody knows, these are tough times, and we were talking about revenue numbers before, which I know are very dry to listen to. But they're really important. And as our first selectman wrote in his letter to the Board of Selectmen about our budget, when he presented it, he said, and I'm behind him on this, we must prepare for the eventual loss of state aid, currently at $7.62 million, and the burden it will have on our property taxes. Like it or not, that is what we are dealing with, and it is unpleasant. This is a very difficult job, and I'm not looking for sympathy when I say that, but there are so many things to consider in the equation here. So I just ask for your understanding with that. We're balancing the needs of parents, for those that are on fixed income, for the elderly, for the against economic conditions. I talk to people on the street, and they tell me how they feel about their tax burden. I talk to parents who talk to me about their education and what they want to see there. So there are a lot of things to consider in this equation. I'll start first with the Board of Ed. The addition of, so our enrollment's down, is it 55 kids this year? I think 50. I feel like a lot of the mental health issues that our kids are facing I just wonder why why is so much of the burden on our teachers and our schools? I mean, you guys have your own kids to deal with, and I don't know. I know everybody seems to be doing the best they can, but I sort of think there needs to be more of a role of parents dealing with this problem and not as much falling on our schools. And I'm having a hard time with supporting a staff aug of 3.2 FTEs when enrollment's down 50%, with our enrollment from the state down over $1 million. I just can't make that work. And I'm not, there's different ways to go through this budget. I was not prepared, and I really want to deal on more of a macro level. So I'm not going to recommend where you cut anything. When we talked, when the town and the Board of Ed made their presentations, I had my questions on certain line items. I assume people took notes on that and saw where my concerns were and my questions and did the math and said, she must think there's some work to be done here. So I'm not going to do that again. I am going to just say that the Board of Ed budget is up $1.2 million, and I can't support that number. So I'm just gonna flat out say I'm not behind the staff aug. So that would be $208,000, and that's pretty much all I have to say about the Board of Ed budget. Other than, I mean this sincerely, thanks for everybody's hard work. There's no easy answers here. I'll let you figure out where you want to spread that cut, but that's my opinion. When it comes to the town,
So your Board of Ed suggestion is 208.
yes. When it comes to the town, I talked earlier about my concern for going into the fund balance of $675,000. I know it's a zero budget on the surface, but we're tipping into that fund, which has me very, I don't think it's responsible for us to dip into the fund balance again when we have all of this new bonding coming. I think it puts us in a precarious situation, and I'm not comfortable with that. So I kind of think we need to offset that with some town cuts. And there's not a lot of room to do that. But I will say, which I've said over and over, is I think our salaries have escalated on a higher rate than I think is appropriate. So rather than go through each one, I'm not going to do that either. But what I am going to suggest is, and I estimated, because that's all I really want to work with, there's probably 10 department heads that are not affiliated, and their salaries are plus or minus $100,000. So I estimated that those salaries are higher by a percent of 100,000 times 10 gives me a number of $10,000 to cut from the town budget. And I think there's also, in that regard, and there's also some room in the fire I mean, we're always looking at the fire departments and the police because they're the largest budgets. The Flanders Fire Department is up over 6% since 2017 actuals. Niantic is only up 0.34%. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because Flanders has to answer more calls on 95 and that demand has gone up. They're also up 4% from last year, and Niantic is only up 1.4%, although the Niantic budget, I think, is larger, if I'm not mistaken, by 100,000. Yes. So I think there's room there to become a little bit more efficient. Plus, we have the fire study that we did this year. There's going to be some opportunity in there for us to optimize our operations a little bit more. So I'm going to propose another $10,000 cut there. So that leaves me with $20,000 with the town, and I'm hoping we can I'd like us to take some of that out of the fund balance, because I'm not comfortable, like I said, with us dipping in there as much as we did. So
your suggestion is 208 from Board of Ed, 10,000 from non-specific salary, and 10,000 from 218 Flanders.
I'm not saying where we should cut. I'm saying 20,000 from the town budget. I'll let our first selectman and the fire chiefs figure out if he wants to go there, but I see room there.
So it's non-specific.
Yeah, I'm not going to go there because these guys are closer to that than me. This is just my read on what I've seen in the budgets.
Okay. Got it.
And I will just underscore that we're going to lose revenue from the state. I mean, I know it's unpleasant. It's not going to get to be a better picture. For us, every year coming back for budgets, for increases, I think is pie in the sky. As much as I would love to give it to you, I don't think it's responsible or realistic. I think it's putting our heads in the sand. So, I mean, from 2013 to 2016, 4 budget years, our budget increases were less than 3%. Last year, our budget increase was 6.2% because we got hit from the state so badly. We're looking at, I think, a 5.6% increase if we adopt this budget right now. And while some of us are in a position to afford that, there's a lot of people that aren't, and I just don't think it's consistent with the economy we're in and the financial climate of the state that we're in. So I am moving in a different direction. I'm not moving in the direction of asking for more. It's kind of like your own household budget. If your salaries get cut at home, we generally don't go out and buy new stuff. So, kind of simple for me in that regard.
Okay,
Thanks.
208 and 20. Thank you. Neil?
Well, now I really wish I did go before Lisa. That's a hard act to follow. I mean, it was very well thought out and, again, good ideas and good concepts. First of all, since there's so many people here supporting the Board of Education, I just want to go on record as saying I thought that the Board of Ed did a fantastic job presenting the budget. And oftentimes my line of questioning may come across as harsh. It doesn't necessarily mean that I am challenging or not believing the numbers that you present to us. But what it means is that at the end of the day, this board has to approve a $70 million expenditure in their budget. And we need to feel very confident that what we are approving makes sense to us and that perhaps the rest of the town people, the taxpayers, understand what that's about. So when we ask questions, we may even know what the answer is. But again, this is taped. There's members in the audience. When we ask questions, it's an opportunity for you to speak to the budget and make sure that everybody involved in the process understands. So some of the comments also that I made when you presented your budget may have been interpreted as I do not support young families moving into the town with a number of children coming into our school system. I apologize if I did not articulate myself well. That is not my intention at all. So in order to properly explain my position on this, I have a prepared statement. In no way do I want to deter families with 3 or any number of children moving into town. I absolutely believe this type of migration is natural and necessary to ensure the vitality of our community. What I fail to articulate is that I believe it is critical to manage the balance between households with children and households without. Losing a disproportionate number of wealthy households with no children creates a financial strain on municipalities, as well as a greater burden on the remaining taxpayers in town. Additionally, I believe that pricing some households on fixed incomes with no children out of the market is just wrong, and it could be interpreted as a response to the demands of a more vocal, but not necessarily larger demographic. So what am I saying? What I try to do is to achieve the balance that creates an economic model that can sustain itself. So I'm not looking to skew our demographics in one fashion versus another. I'm looking for that balance where we can sustain ourselves going forward. I hope that makes sense. With all that being said, I was happy when the director of the Commission on Aging came to us last week and reported that our elderly demographic is stabilized. We're not losing as many people in that age demographic as I may have previously believed, and that's good news. So that's just the clarification that I wanted to make this evening. And really, if anybody has any additional questions for me, I would welcome them to call me, discuss it. 691-0883. Okay. That being said, I don't have any specific line item reductions or additions to the Board of Ed. Again, I have moved away from that very micromanaging type of strategy where I make those kind of suggestions. Perhaps my questions, as Lisa said, during the presentation of the budget may have given some idea of where I thought maybe we were spending too much, maybe where we weren't. As far as the additional personnel with regard to the psychologists, I do believe it's a good idea. I mean, I do understand the whole concept that the problems are first recognized in this type of school environment. And And I think that we need some kind of supports there, I do. But how we go from 0 to 3.2, I'm not really clear on that. Maybe we should phase that in slowly, monitor if it's actually working, and maybe get some measurements of success that you could come back to us and say, these are the metrics that we're measuring this program on, and this is how we've exceeded expectations, and we'd like to add one more. So perhaps maybe we could just fund one of those positions. I'll digress this just for a moment outside of Board of Ed and onto the town side, because what I'm not hearing from this whole conversation is, how can parents get involved with monitoring the behavior of their children and identifying early on whether there's an issue to be concerned about? And I thought about that, and I thought, well,